Greetings, citizens. Hey you beautiful creepy human being you. Welcome to my channel and welcome to today's true crime video. I'm so happy we could meet like this. I'm so happy that somehow in all of this craziness that we're forced to deal with on the day-to-day, today you and I were able to find each other on this crazy little planet that we call home. My name is Brittany or Bratterstein, whichever you prefer, and today we're going to be discussing the horrifying murder of 18-year-old Rachel Pernosky. But before we get started, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every single week, sometimes 2 a week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. One of us, one of us, one of us. Now, before I get into this case, I need to first say a thank you to the sponsor of today's video, and that is Skillshare. Sponsors like Skillshare make it possible for me to put out videos as consistently as I do. And if you're not familiar with Skillshare, which you should be by now if you've been here before, you're gonna get familiar with Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community that offers lifelong learners skills that will benefit them for a lifetime. And you probably have noticed that me and Skillshare have been kind of in like a pretty committed long-term relationship for the last year or so, and that's because they've been super beneficial for me and this channel. Because if you don't know, I do everything myself: writing, researching, editing. Everything is just me. And I had to teach myself how to do those things. A lot of that stuff was stuff I did not know. And I don't know if you guys even know this, but this is, in the last year, like become my job. So Skillshare has been very instrumental in helping me tackle this new chapter in my life. I mean, I was a paralegal for like almost 10 years and I went through a complete career change. And in this ever-changing world, learning new skills is super important because just jobs aren't like they used to be. So Skillshare has helped me keep up with this ever-changing world that we are in by helping me fine-tune some existing skills that I already had and also teach me completely new skills that are helping me with this current chapter in my life. So if you're anything like me, you will love Skillshare too, because it's an online learning community that offers thousands of classes to a community of members across 150 countries. And they offer these classes in a variety of subjects, from classes on things like social media success, productivity, and time management, or what I'm currently most interested in, and that is classes on podcasting. Basically anything you are interested in, you will be able to learn about through Skillshare. So I recently started taking a new class. I've been taking a lot of new classes recently, all on the same subject. And this is called How to Make a Podcast, Plan, Record, and Launch with Success. And this class is taught by John Lagomarcino. And I've really been enjoying it because it teaches you, as the title implies, how to create a podcast. And this is something that I've been wanting to add to my already busy schedule for a while. Because here's the thing. I love YouTube. YouTube is my #1 place for most things, but I know a lot of people go specifically to podcasts to get all of their true crime stories. I know that that is the case. And I've already done so much research, right? I've already looked into so many cases and I have so much information knocking around in my brain. Like, why wouldn't I put it on several platforms so more people could listen and learn? You know what I mean? Like, it just feels like, even though I'm not convinced I have the voice for podcasting, I'm trying to do a little bit of like working smarter, not harder. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? And that's why I find Skillshare to be so beneficial for my life, because they are helping me learn the skills to do that and to see if adding podcasting, for example, is something that I want to put into my life and to learn the steps it would take to make it successful. This is something that I had no idea how to do, and now I have an idea on how to do that. So if you too were to become a Skillshare member, you would have access to a multitude of classes on basically anything that your heart desires. And the best part for me, well, one of the best parts, obviously, like the selection is a humongous draw, but a huge thing for me is you can take any of these classes on your own time. And for me, like, that is vital because I have such a small amount of free time to be able to dedicate to learning something new. Having a new baby, I need to be able, I say a new baby, he's 10 months old. Having a child, I need to be able to do it on my own time. And you can do that with Skillshare. And it just gives me the opportunity to learn something new, develop my craft further, fill my own cup so I can continue going about filling everyone else's. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. So great news. Skillshare is offering the first 1,000 members of the Brat Pack to click the link in the top of my description box the opportunity to peruse all of the classes that Skillshare has to offer for 1 month free today. So if you're like me and you want to join a community of rad lifelong learners and learn some skills that will benefit you for a lifetime, make sure to click the link at the top of my description box, because the first 1,000 people to do so will get a free month to peruse all of the classes that Skillshare has to offer today. And now I just want to say a big thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. Without their partnership, it would be really difficult for me to put out videos as consistently as I do. And I want to say a big thank you to you guys for always being so supportive of all of my sponsors. You rock, don't ever change. So now that I'm done spreading the good word of Skillshare, we can go ahead and get into today's video. Now today's video is a video that I came upon while researching another case. It was one of the articles on the side. A tale as old as time with me. That's basically how I find all my cases if they're not recommended by you. And this was a case out of Canada, and I realized that I don't have a lot of cases out of Canada. Like, it doesn't come up very much. But anyways, this case stuck out to me because it is so horrible. Rachel, she was so young, and she was murdered in such a horrible way, and by a person that she did not trust, but that she was trying to trust. Somebody who she was trying to give a second chance, who really did not fucking deserve it, which we will get into. And this person went on to violate this trust, violate her just everything. So today I'm going to tell you that entire story. I read all the things so you do not have to. And at the end of the video, I want you to answer the question of the day. I'm going to give it to you now so you can have it knocking around in your brain while I give you all these details. But I want to give it to you now real quick, and that is this. What do you think was the motive for the murder of Rachel Pernosky? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below after I give you all the details about this case. Now, with all of that said, come gather around and let me tell you the story of the tragic and just very disturbing murder of 18-year-old Rachel Pernosky. I want to start this video off with a quote from Rachel's family. It's something that they said after she was murdered, and I feel like it gives you just an idea of really what we're dealing with here and what to expect. So her family said, and I quote, "It is excruciating to not have Rachel in our lives any longer. And what makes this more difficult is knowing that an estranged family member has been charged with her murder." Yeah. So to get started, let's jump in our handy dandy time machine and we're going to head to March of 2013. It is a Tuesday evening and a cyclist is just riding down Old Orchard Road, which is in Chilliwack, which is in British Columbia in Canada. So they're just riding along when they notice something very disturbing down the side of a steep embankment. And this was the body of a young woman. The RCMP is called in, which is the Canadian National Police Force, in case you're curious and you're not local to Canada, because I wasn't sure. I knew it was like the Canadian police, but I just wanted to make sure I was being correct when I'm reporting about some place that I'm not from. So they're called in and they cordon off the area so nobody could go in or out and they could do their policing. Because of where the body was located, they actually had to call in search and rescue to retrieve her because it was like a really steep terrain. And when they did, they weren't sure who this woman was because there wasn't, how do I word this? She wasn't from this area, so it wasn't somebody who was local to this specific area in Chilliwack who they were looking for. They weren't missing a woman there. But once they did recover her, they would find that this was the body of 18-year-old Rachel Pernosky. And she was a missing young mother of one baby boy, fucking destroy me, from Mission, which was another city in British Columbia, about 60 kilometers or 37 miles away from where she was found. I feel like it had to have been pretty clear to investigators right from the beginning that Rachel had been murdered. Obviously, they'd have to recover her. They'd have to do an autopsy, cause of death, manner of death. All of that would have to be determined. But like, an 18-year-old girl doesn't throw herself down a steep embankment 40 miles away from home after going missing just suddenly. You know what I mean? Like, it seems like it had to be clear. And once her family found out where she was found and how she was found, they were devastated, right? Heartbroken. Her sister, Brittany, had to go on Facebook. They had this Facebook page for Finding Rachel that had 2,000 members, over 2,000 members, just sitting there waiting, holding their breath, hoping for a good solution to this, hoping that Rachel would be coming home. And she had to now tell them that she wasn't. And she simply posted, quote, "We did our best." Now, what happened here and who was Rachel? Now, what really breaks my heart here is there isn't a ton of information on Rachel that I was able to find for this video. If you've been here before, you know. I really like giving you a whole backstory on a person we're talking about here because they are so much more than just the way they were killed. But in her case, there just isn't a ton of information out there. It seems like this case didn't get a ton of coverage. I don't know if that's a Canadian thing or if it's just, people are killed every day and the media picks and chooses who they find to be worth reporting on, which is ridiculous. And I think Rachel's worth reporting on. So I'm going to tell you everything that I was able to find out here. So Rachel Pernosky was born on June 15th, 1994, and she grew up in Mission, and this is where she was still living when she was murdered. She had went to Fraserview Elementary School and then had went on to Mission, secondary school, where she was very popular among her friends. Rachel, by all accounts that I read, seemed to be a wonderful girl with a laugh like no other that could brighten up anyone's mood. Rachel was very close with her sister Brittany, who is 2 years older than her. And Brittany is seemingly heartbroken by her sister's loss, saying that like she loves her and misses everything about her, from her terrible jokes that were followed by her completely obnoxious laugh, to the fact that she just misses hanging out with her, and she's never going to forget her or the sound, again, of that very obnoxious laugh that I feel like anyone with siblings can understand. She also said that she misses the fact that, and this just got me a little bit, that Rachel was the type of little sister who would just take things all the time without asking, and that if anything went missing in the house, they knew, like, they need to go check Rachel's room because she probably has it. She was definitely considered like a wild teenager, somebody with a very, very vivacious, plentiful social life, but somehow she was able to manage it. She was able to balance doing that and also trying to finish school. And she was probably able to do this because in addition to being very wild, she was also like very organized. Rachel was the type of person who wrote down lists and reminders and little quotes to remember and live her life by. The January before she was killed, she posted like a photo of a page from her notebook online where she wrote, quote, "Be an adventurer in search of treasure." Rachel was a young mother, which to people who knew her kind of made sense. Like one of her friends who was also named Rachel said that all through school together, Rachel was like the nurturing, guiding big sister to her. So her having a child just made total sense. When she was killed, she was 18 years old, and she had a young son named Marco, and Marco was actually named for a boy in town who had died 2 years earlier. And Marco had just turned 1 year old the February before his mother was murdered. Rachel was said to love this little boy dude, and he loved her too. Her sister said that they had an unbelievable relationship. Marco was actually living with his father, who had custody of him at this time, and he was living with his dad and his grandparents. But it was said to be like an amicable situation. Like Rachel and Marco's dad were said to have a good relationship. Like it wasn't this bad breakup in this custody battle. They were just doing what they had to do. And Marco was living with his dad, and Rachel was visiting him whenever she could. And Marco, man, loved her, and every time anybody would walk through the door where he lived, he would always quickly turn his head to see if it was his mom. It's just really sad. I don't know. I think it's because I have like a little baby that it makes me, I can't even like think about it. Like the idea of not being there for him and the idea of him not getting to see me and to miss out on all that and me to miss out on all that is really fucking sad. And like it really breaks my heart. But it did that for everybody. Everybody who knew her was devastated to lose this like petite little green-eyed sweet girl. Now, her disappearance. So it was discovered that Rachel was missing when she missed a hangout with one of her friends. So basically Rachel and her best friend Cassidy were supposed to get together and have a day date. They were going to go to the movies and go and get sushi, which sounds like a literal dream. But Rachel never showed up. And this was weird already. But what made it weirder is that Cassidy like called Rachel over and over, and Rachel, who was described as the type of girl who had her phone attached to her hand, did not answer. So this was weird enough to Cassidy that she actually reached out to Brittany, Rachel's older sister, to see if she had heard from her or had any idea what was going on. So Brittany decides that she's going to go check it out and see what's going on. So she heads over to Rachel's apartment. And when she gets there, there's nothing like immediately outwardly weird. Like there's no sign of forced entry and there's no smashed windows, anything like that. But when she goes inside, that's when she's like, something is off here. Because like the lights were on, the music was playing, and Rachel's phone and purse were there, but she wasn't. This made no sense because Rachel, again, was the type of person who had her phone glued to her hand. If she had gone anywhere, if she had taken herself anywhere, she would have taken that phone. And on top of that, Brittany looked into it and discovered that Rachel's social media had just like abruptly stopped the night before. And she was the type of girl who was on social media. Like I was able to see her Twitter and she tweeted constantly. So to have her just fall off the map, not get on social media, not be in her house, but also not have her phone and not have her purse, none of this was sitting right with her sister. So her family immediately goes and reports her missing and tells police exactly what I just told you about the phone and the purse being there, about the social media being, she ghosted social media, and the fact that no one had been able to get a hold of her, and nobody had heard from her. Did I say that right? I think so. Once police heard all that and heard the fact that she had no history of running away, plus the fact that her purse was left at the house, so she had no money, no debit cards, no credit cards, no way to get anywhere, police took it pretty seriously right away and realized that something must be wrong here. After it was discovered that Rachel was missing, Cassidy, the friend she was supposed to meet with that day, posted on her Facebook saying, and I quote, "I will not stop thinking of you until you are home safe with me, your family, and your friends. I love you so much." Right away, a massive search was launched. And the Regional Integrated Homicide Investigation Team started working with Mission RCMP because the disappearance seemed to be suspicious. Like, they didn't think that she went away on her own. And Mission Search and Rescue volunteers also started helping and searched all over Rachel's neighborhood, going up and down trails and looking in wooded areas near her home to see if they could find any clues. The RCMP were even hoping to do some aerial searches to cover a wider area, while her friends and family searched on foot, telling everyone they came in contact with what was going on and to be on the lookout. And they also took, of course, to social media, because that's like the way you get things out now. A Facebook page was created, as I said in the beginning, that was dedicated to finding Rachel and, posting clues and leads, organizing searches, all the things that you do in this and keep everybody up to date. And it quickly grew to like 2,000-3,000 people, 2,000 to 3,000 people who were just sitting and waiting and hoping that Rachel would be found. A description was put out to the media of Rachel so that people could be on the lookout, and she was described as being 5'5", 115 pounds, with long dark hair and green eyes. And she was said to have last been seen wearing jeans that had jewels on the back pockets and a purple hooded sweatshirt with a pink and white design on the front. As days go on, people are getting more and more worried that something horrible has happened to Rachel. And this is especially after Sunday came and went, because Sunday was a day that Rachel was supposed to go see her son. She always visited him on Fridays and Sundays. So for her to not show up just did not happen. She was obsessed with this child. Like, every photo she posted about them, on social media, she just talked about how in love she was with him, how obsessed she was with him, how he was her entire world. So for her to not show up made no sense. But for some reason, even though police were like looking for her and really searching, they didn't think that foul play was involved. But her family was like, there is no way that she left on her own. And her aunt even said of this, and I quote, "She was not stressed. She was not worried. She was looking forward to spending some downtime with the family." Now, in investigating the case, the police were able to get a couple of leads, and some really helpful leads came from police actually speaking to neighbors who saw things the night that Rachel disappeared. One neighbor said that she had been sitting outside smoking a cigarette with her husband when she saw Rachel sitting outside as well. The neighbor said that they had last seen Rachel on March 16th at about 12:30 in the morning. Rachel had been outside of her apartment. It was like a basement apartment on Kite Street, and she was sitting outside smoking a cigarette and drinking with a man. And this man was described as maybe having a medium build, being about 5'10", and wearing a baseball hat. And not just that, they also saw that this man was driving a white truck with brown lettering, which what they believed was brown lettering on the side. What was really helpful about this is more than one neighbor saw this. More than one neighbor said they saw her out there that night. They said they saw her at about 12:30, that they looked back at about a half an hour later. They looked back about a half an hour later, and she was gone. And they said that in looking at Rachel and looking at that interaction, there was nothing about it that made them feel like the cops needed to be called or there was anything to worry about. The two seemed very casual and seemed like they were just like chatting away. So police have this lead, but they don't know where Rachel is, and they're kind of running out of ways and places to go. But then they get a clue that makes them think that maybe they're onto something. And this is when they find out that some volunteers had been cleaning the side of a highway when they found some women's clothes. Not thinking anything of it at the time, they had just taken it and like gotten rid of it in a landfill. But now this was getting to police. This information was coming to police's, front door. And they were learning that the clothes that were taken to the landfill were described, and they seemed to match clothing that Rachel's family said that she owned. So with that, a small area of the highway was like cordoned off so that they could search for evidence. Because if her clothes were there, if they were her clothes, there could be more there. So they're looking at that. And at the same time, they also closed the landfill down for like a couple of hours so they could try to find these clothes. And somehow, miraculously, they were able to find her clothes. And when I think of that, I'm like, how? Because when stuff goes into a landfill, that is its new home. So for them to be able to find the clothes, it's amazing. But it turns out these clothes did not belong to Rachel, so now they're back to square one. But the police were optimistic about it, which is, good for them. They were like, listen, she wasn't here, like that sucks, but now we have eliminated 2 areas of concern, but you still need to stay vigilant because there is an 18-year-old girl who is missing. So Rachel's gone. and they have no idea where she is. All they know is that she was last seen in the company of a young man, but police aren't coming out and saying exactly who this young man is, though a lot of people do know who this young man is, and we are going to get into that a little bit later. But then we come to the day that she was found. 3 days after she went missing, Rachel Pernosky's body was discovered, and obviously the searches were called off. She was found down that steep embankment, and when it was, when they got there and they started looking around, they weren't able to determine whether she had been killed there or whether she had been dumped there. And she had to be taken away, obviously, so that an autopsy could be performed. It was then determined that Rachel had suffered blunt force trauma to the head before she was suffocated to death, and it appeared to have been manual asphyxiation, which is generally like a pretty personal method of murder. They also determined, and this is horrible, that she had been violated in several different ways after death. And I'm not going to get into the specifics of how she was, but there are, 3 main ways, and they were all done. So whoever did this to her was a fucking monster. Her family was crushed. When it was determined that it was Rachel, they went over to inform her family of the news, and her sister Brittany said that it was just completely devastating, that it was like news, it was the information you never wanted to hear. And they said that like she was young and vibrant and at the prime of her life and had everything ahead of her, and that she just like did not deserve this. Which I honestly can't even imagine, because when I think about a parent losing their child, that sounds like the worst possible thing anyone could ever go through. So I can't even imagine how they were feeling, you know what I mean? I always say that, but it's true. If you really try to put yourself in that position, which I wouldn't recommend because it's devastating, like that's the worst thing in the entire world. And as far as the community went, they were shocked. The seemingly randomness of this attack, this 18-year-old girl just taken from her home and murdered and thrown on the side of the road like a piece of trash. It was too much for people to handle. And then police had public safety like in the forefront of their mind. And they actually came out right away and said that even though this did seem random, that they believe this was not a random attack, that this was a targeted attack, and that the general public had nothing to fear. Even though at the time they didn't have a suspect, they said they didn't have a suspect or a motive, but they were interviewing several people of interest. And for the record, because I'm sure somebody's thinking it, Rachel's son, Marco's father, was ruled out pretty immediately. Because I know that like when a woman is killed, that is where your first mind would go. But he was ruled out right away. And in case you're wondering where Marco was when this happened, he was with his father. In the beginning, it was also reported that it was believed that she could have come upon foul play based on, I'm not wording this right. Basically, they thought that maybe she could have been killed by somebody who she had met online because she did have such a social media presence. And it seems like the police were going under this theory a little bit because they did have access to her social media and they were searching for clues on there. And at one point I know they had access to her Twitter because she tweeted all the time. And for a period after she first was killed, like a bunch of her tweets were taken down. And I think that's because the police, obviously I'm speculating here, but I think that's because the police were like looking into some things she'd been tweeting and didn't want everyone to look into the things she was tweeting. But since then, I'm pretty sure everything is back up on her Twitter because I did go and like read her Twitter. This did end up seeming like a dead end though, at least like the theory that she had been killed by somebody, like a stranger she met on the internet. That seemed to like fall out of favor with police pretty quickly. And they were left with asking the public for help, asking the public to come forward with any tips, any clues, any information that they had, and reminded them that this is an 18-year-old girl that was brutally murdered, and a hole was left in the hearts of all the people who loved her, and a child was left without his mother. Even the mayor spoke out about Rachel's death, saying that it was tragic and that something this intense happening in this sort of area was super, super rare, and then pointed out that Rachel was very well known. She was well known from the school and she was popular in the community, and just said that it was a super, super sad thing for everyone. She was well known in the community, and the community like came out for Rachel. So many things happened after she was killed in her honor. First, of course, the family and the social media page for Rachel were flooded with condolences. And then several businesses started collecting donations for a fund set up for her family and for her son. There was a benefit concert held at a pool hall that brought in money, and money also came in online. And a donation box was set up at a coffee shop where Brittany, Rachel's sister, worked. And a silent auction was held during an annual talent show. A couponing class donated part of their proceeds to the fund. A coffee place was collecting donations. Like, these places and people really showed up for this girl and her family. They even went as far as setting up a trust fund for Marco, which is honestly amazing because though he was young when this happened, he was only 1 year old when his mom was killed. By the time his mother's killer was caught and convicted, he was older. And his family says that he has struggled seriously because of this, that he's in counseling, and that this is going to be a burden he's going to have to carry for the rest of his life. So the fund is very helpful. And on top of all of that, on top of all the businesses, there was, of course, a candlelight vigil held in Rachel's honor. More than 300 people stood in a windy park with their lit candles, and there were flowers and candles inside the park's gazebo, along with a photo of Rachel and her son Marco. Rachel's friends and family, along with her son, were present, and she was remembered for being a smiling, sweet, happy, free-spirited girl with an outgoing personality that didn't hold back anything and made friends easily. She was just said to be one of those types of people who made you feel like you were her best friend no matter who you were, and just always was able to make you smile. So people were remembering her for that, but they were also angry, reasonably so. You're allowed to be happy and like loving because you miss her and you care about her. You're also allowed to be sad because she's gone. And you're allowed to be fucking angry because of how she was killed, because of what happened to her. Rachel's former soccer coach was present at the vigil and ended up saying of this specific topic, and I quote, "I'm upset. I helped look for her. I want to find out what happened. I want to know what creep did this. It's shocking." Anyways, more than 30 police officers were assigned to Rachel's case, and they had the task of going through everything, through all the evidence, through all the interviews, going through and talking to every person of interest, which they said they had several. But even though they said they had several people of interest, there was one person who was kind of in the back of their minds from the beginning. And this was the same person that the family kind of thought might have something to do with it as well. But they just did not have enough evidence in the beginning to charge and convict this person with the crime. So time went on. 3 years went by. 3 years, from 2013 to 2016. They had this guy in the back of their mind, but they didn't have enough evidence to arrest him. But then they did. And when it came out who this was, wow. In June of 2016, there was finally enough evidence to make it possible for police to make an arrest in the connection with the murder of Rachel Pernosky. A 31-year-old man was arrested without incident, and he was charged with second-degree murder and indignity to a body. And this was Matthew Pernosky, Rachel's half-brother, her blood half-brother. Bro, I know, especially when I told you what he did to her. I know. I was like, what? Like, okay. Anyways, once it came out that the arrest was being made, Rachel's family came out and made a statement saying specifically, and I quote, "We are very grateful and relieved that an arrest has been made in connection with Rachel's murder. Rachel was a mother, daughter, sister, and friend. Rachel's absence from our lives has left many broken hearts and great devastation. She is missed and remembered each and every day. She was a strong and beautiful young woman with her whole life ahead of her. Our sweet Rachel will never have the opportunity to live out her dreams. She didn't deserve this. Her senseless murder has left behind a young boy who will never know his mother and will one day need answers to questions that he should never have to ask. We would like to thank the investigators at IHIT who have worked tirelessly to achieve justice for Rachel. It is excruciating to not have Rachel in our lives any longer, and what makes this more difficult is knowing that an estranged family member has been charged with her murder. There are no words to describe the pain that we're feeling or the difficulty we are facing with processing all of this. For this, we ask for privacy and thank you for allowing us to tell you about who Rachel was in life and the deep void we all feel with her gone. You will never be forgotten, Rachel." Now, like Rachel, I wasn't able to find a ton of information out about Matthew, which, to be honest, I don't really want to know that much about an asshole like this, but I was able to find some, so I will give you what I was able to find. So Matthew was born to a young mother, and by young mother I mean 18. She was 18 years old when she had him, and him and Rachel were half siblings. They shared a father, which means they shared the same blood. Matthew's parents separated when he was young. I believe they separated when he was only 2. So he had gone to live with his mother at first, but then after a little bit of time, he went and moved in with his father and his father's new wife. He did end up moving back in with his mother when he was about 11 years old. I guess he was having issues with his stepmother. He says that she was physically abusive and would beat him with spoons, so he left and went back to live with his mother. And despite this, his father stayed with this woman that would have been abusing his son, until Matthew was in his 20s. So he stayed with her a while after that. Eventually, Matthew did leave his mother's home again. He said that he felt like his mother had given up on him, and he said that in combination with his father's rejection, because I guess after moving out of his dad's house, he did give his dad his contact information so that they could try to reconnect after several years of not talking, and his dad just never hit him up. He said that these two things really affected him. But after leaving his mother's house, he went and lived with his grandparents for a while, but then his grandparents ended up separating, and he felt like he was the one who was to be blamed for this separation. So he gets kicked out of his grandparents' house, and because of that, he says he did not graduate high school. In addition to that, because all of that was what he was saying was causing his trauma and why he ended up the person he ended up, he also said that when he was younger, I believe he was around 8 years old, he was abused by a female neighbor, but that he never came forward and said anything at the time. I don't think he said anything to anyone until he was an adult, and I think it was after he was arrested. Apparently his parents knew that he had some issues, at least his mother did, because she did encourage him to get some counseling. I don't know if he ever did. If he did, I didn't see it reported, but I did see it reported that he was diagnosed with depression, but he didn't do anything to try to get out of that hole and do anything to actually, help with his depression. Like, he didn't get treatment or take medications or anything like that. He was said to have a little bit of employment here and there, but nothing substantial. He was trying to get a job and lose a job. And he had a few short relationships, but nothing serious, prior to him murdering his sister, which is when he was 27 years old. But mind you, that's how old he was when he did this. At 27 years old, he killed his 18-year-old sister, who, despite bouncing around a lot throughout his life, he knew her like most of his life. It wasn't like they were estranged, but like they knew each other. You know what I mean? Now, there's one more thing that was notable about Matthew's past, in my opinion. So it turns out, between the years of 1999 and 2001, when Rachel would have been, 5 to 7, because she was born in 1994, Matthew Pernosky ended up being arrested for sexually abusing Rachel and her sister. So he would have been 15 to 16 at this time. And she was 5 to 7. And I didn't see if this was Brittany. I didn't look into it much further. There's not a ton of information about it. And honestly, I wouldn't want to look it up anyway because it's gross. But yeah, he was arrested. And guess how much time he got for this? 2 years. And not 2 years in jail. 2 years of probation with a suspended sentence. Now, the reason I bring this up is because it actually matters. It matters in this case because this assault against Rachel is why she was meeting with Matthew in the first place. Matthew had reached out to Rachel telling her that he wanted to make amends. He wanted to apologize to her for what he did to her as a child. And Rachel, being a good and caring person, allowed him that chance. Now, we will get into all of that soon, what he did, how this happened, but first I want to talk about how he got caught. So, it appears that police had him in their sights from the very beginning. He was one of the first suspects they had. They questioned him back in 2013, and he said he had nothing to do with it. And though they weren't sure they believed him, they didn't have enough evidence to prove that he did, with enough to actually arrest him for it. So, they kept him in his mind, and they waited. And they waited until finally in 2016, they were like, okay. And they set up a sting operation to try to get him to confess. So basically, this undercover officer pretended to be the head of a criminal organization and went by the alias of Mr. Big. And then would meet up with Matthew. I don't know why I called him Matt. We're not on a first name basis. I guess Matthew's a first name, but you know what I mean. Matt's a little more personal. Met up with Matthew to try to get him to confess. And this worked. Matthew confessed to this officer that he had killed his sister because she, quote, acted like a victim in the situation between him and his sister, when really it was he who suffered because he's the one who had to go through the court process as a child, and that damaged him. I can't make this shit up. He is saying that he was the victim, not her, when he's the one who molested her, and that she acted like a victim, so that's why he did what he did. And he got into more specifics than that. And all of the details he gave lined up with the evidence they actually had at the scene. So they knew that he did it. And all of this was caught on hidden video cameras. So he was caught. And now I'm going to tell you what he confessed to doing specifically. And I'm going to let you know now that it's not tight, okay? And this is your heads up on that because it's just gross. This case reminds me a lot of the Jessica Padgett case. If you saw that one, you know what I'm talking about. And that's what this reminds me of. But anyway. So the night of the murder, Matthew went over with what he says was the intention to apologize to Rachel and to try to make amends with her for what he did to her when she was younger. Apparently, the night went well. They hung out. It was friendly conversation. It was easy conversation, which seems hard. They had drinks. They smoked cigarettes. They were having a very normal as normal as it can be when the subject of conversation is you doing that when I was a child, but normal conversation. Everything was fine. He said that at some point during the night, Rachel started texting with a friend of hers, and the friend was like, this friend knew what was happening, knew who she was meeting up with and what it was about. So she asked, like, how's it going? You know? And Rachel said that it was going good, that the conversation was good, that it was a little bit emotional, but good, and that she just kind of wished that he would leave soon because it was getting late and she was tired. I mean, when the neighbor saw her outside, it was already after 12:30. Apparently, somehow he saw this text exchange, and this enraged him. Enraged him enough that he went on to hit her over the head and then pin her down on the ground and suffocate her by putting his hand over her nose and mouth while she fought him. She would pry his hand away, and she would beg for her life, but he continued to do it until she was dead. Once she was dead, he took her body, he put it in a bag, and then put it in his vehicle and transported her to his home, which was in Abbotsford, another city. And when they got there, he took her out of the bag, and he abused her body in the way that I said before putting it back in the bag, driving to Chilliwack, dumping her body over that embankment, and leaving it out in the wooded area in the elements like nothing. He then went on to try to cover his tracks by sending texts to and from Rachel's phone to make it seem like she was still alive after he left. And then he went on to destroy her keys and other personal items in an attempt to make it seem like she just disappeared. So as I said, he was arrested and he was charged with second-degree murder. So second-degree murder came with a life sentence, which it should. And so it comes with a life sentence, but then you have the eligibility for parole anywhere from like 10 to 25 years, as opposed to first-degree murder in Canada, where you are automatically given 25 years before you're eligible for parole. Now, before Matthew's confession could be used at trial, the Crown, which is like the Canadian court, had to have a hearing to decide if the confession would be admissible. Now, I don't know if this is something that Canada just always does automatically. The way I read it, it sounds like it does. If you're from Canada, let me know. But they have this hearing. And I guess they decided that it was admissible because the reason I think they did is because all of a sudden, Matthew gives us a Shyamalan twist when he, on the day that the trial is supposed to begin, so years after the murder, Matthew pleads guilty to second-degree murder. He's like, okay, I did it. I guess the family learned about this deal like 2 days before the trial was supposed to start. So they found out about it and they were actually relieved. They were happy that this had happened because, I mean, they were going after him for second-degree murder anyway. So wouldn't a guilty plea just be inevitable? Not inevitable, but like if they're trying to get a guilty plea and he's just giving it to you now, you get to not have to deal with the trial because her family was beat. Her mother was just emotionally exhausted and depressed, and just like imagine going through a trial and having to hear details and see photos. Like, no. Her family also said that they weren't really surprised by the plea. Like, they always knew that he did it. Like, they knew he did it. It was just a matter of him saying that he did it, and that it doesn't really change much because you can't really get real closure from something like this. So now all the family had to do is just wait for the sentencing hearing where both sides, prosecution and defense, would have to argue as to why he should or should not have parole and how long he should have to wait, and the family could get their victim impact statements in. So the hearing comes, it happens, and Rachel's family and friends are there. It's like flooded with people who loved her, and they give their victim impact statements at that time. Rachel's sister, Rachel's mother, the father of Rachel's son all gave their victim impact statements. I don't believe they read them themselves, and I don't know if that's a Canadian thing again, but I think it was the prosecution who read them for them. I could be wrong. Let me know if you know. Her sister said during her victim impact statement, and I quote, "Words cannot express the pain and anguish our family and friends have endured since Rachel's murder. Our lives have been forever changed. We are forever broken and scarred." She added, quote, "Rachel was the victim. She was the only victim. Matthew's not the victim. He may depict himself as a victim in order to get sympathy, but he is not a victim. That's the bottom line. Her mother went on to write that she rarely goes out anymore and is, quote, overwhelmed by emotion, end quote, on a daily basis, adding, and I quote, Rachel's murder has broken my heart. Now, Matthew's attorney did come out and say that his client deserved some leniency, saying that he was a damaged person, but that he was made this way, that this happened to him due to being bounced around from home to home when he was a child, and from the abuse he suffered at the hands of a neighbor when he was 8. The attorney also added that he has a lot of anger built up inside that he never got a chance to deal with, but now that he's been in prison, he has been taking programs and classes, and he's being treated for depression and anxiety, and apparently he is greatly affected by what he did. The attorney told the court that Matthew is traumatized by what he did, which, good. The attorney added that he has nightmares, panic attacks, depression, sleepless nights, and flashbacks of the night, and added that he believes his client suffers from PTSD, and said that he is now getting the help he needs, and said that his client had no prior violent propensities, which I would say, like in my opinion, what he did to Rachel when she was a child, I think that's a bit violent, but maybe that's just me. But that's what I think. That's what I think. He said that his client was not a callous person, but he couldn't explain why Matthew went on to do what he did. He did kind of hint at Matthew was drunk and he might have been on drugs and he might have had an altered state of mind, but Matthew himself admitted that he wasn't drunk. He was kind of buzzed. And the Crown was like, listen, even if that is true, even if you were drunk, I'll say sure, maybe it affected your mind a little bit, but you still did what you did, and that is not an excuse. That doesn't diminish what you've done here. You don't get a free pass because you were drunk. I'm sure a lot of us wish that we did, but guess what? We fucking don't, buddy. Especially not for killing your sister, you asshole. His attorney then went on to claim that poor social skills and familial isolation made him an insecure person. And then went on to say that Matthew, that Matthew had reached out to family members throughout the years, including Rachel, but had been turned down. And when I read that, I was like, so is he saying that her turning him down is part of why he went on to do what he did? Is that his way of blaming her for what happened to her? Because that's how it hit my ear. And in my mind, I'm like, maybe not. Maybe if they had met earlier, he would have just done this sooner. The defense was essentially listen, what he did was bad, yes. But similar cases where people did something equally bad only had to serve 10 years before they were eligible for parole. The attorney went on to say that the period of, quote, ineligibility should be at a higher ends in cases of greater brutality or where multiple offenses have been committed, the offenders have egregious criminal records, or there are multiple deaths involved. So correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like he's saying yes, it was bad, but it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad, so please give him a lesser amount of time before being eligible for parole. Is that how it sounded to you? Because that's how it sounded to me. Because that's what he fucking said. And then he went on to say, even if my client gets parole, it's just an eligibility for parole. You're just giving him eligibility. There's no definite, it's not definitive. That's the words. Those are the words. It's not definitive that he's ever going to get out, And even if he does, he'll have to abide by certain conditions. Now, the prosecution, it seems, initially was trying to make it so Matthew would not get parole at all. They talked about how heinous the crime was. They talked about the fact that his reasoning for killing her, because he felt like she was acting like a victim when she was the victim of what he did to her, was totally an irrational point, an irrational thought. And they also pointed out that she was killed in her home, a place where she had the right to feel safe, and that Matthew had lied to her and came under the false pretenses of apologizing in order to get close to her to kill her. They also pointed out that it took him a long time to do what he did, and that he had many opportunities to change his mind and not do it, like all the times that Rachel was able to pry his hand away from her mouth and beg for her life. Matthew was 250 pounds and 6'1" to Rachel's 5'1" and 117-pound frame, and he was easily able to overpower her. They also believe that his entire reason for meeting her that day was actually to kill her, and then pointed out that he was calculated and cunning in how he hid his tracks after the fact, and how he lied to Rachel's family, to their faces, when he said that she was okay when he left her. Now, ultimately, Matthew was given life in prison, and his eligibility for parole would come after 13 years. And at the time, he had already served 2 years, so he got that credited, so 11 years. So from there, to now, he'll be out in what? Or has the eligibility to be out in like 4 years, which doesn't seem like enough time to me. It really, really doesn't. Especially because like it's gross. It's a horrible murder and he's never given a real motive. And without having a trial, like there's a lot of details that we'll just never be able to know. The judge did make a point to say that this is just how much time he has to serve before he's eligible for parole, but that it's possible that he could never get paroled and that it's up to him to prove to a parole board that he is eligible to be released and that he's safe to be released. The judge basically said that they understood that the family was in pain and that they were confused and that there was a lot of psychological damage that Rachel's murder had caused her family and friends, and that this loss is devastating and long-lasting and no sentence is going to seem sufficient to help them deal with that or to move on from this crime, and said that Matthew, what he did was repulsive, callous, and self-serving, but that the 13 years, that giving him only 13 years before he's eligible for parole was in line with how people were sentenced that did crimes that were similar. So that's that. Matthew did speak at the hearing and did express how sorry he was, for what it's worth, in case you wanted to know. I don't know how much her family really cared how sorry he was, though. I know that I wouldn't really give a fuck how sorry he was if I was in their position, but that's just me. Now, as far as the family goes, they say that they're just focusing on raising Marco, who by the time this conviction happened was 6 years old. Rachel's sister, Brittany, said that Marco is so smart and so good and looks just like his mama. And she said that they go and visit Rachel's grave and that they especially go on his birthday and at Christmas. And this could destroy your heart. This, like, somebody gets there early and leaves a present at her grave that's to Marco from his mama. So when he gets there, he gets something from her. Oh God, I could cry. I'm not gonna, no. Oh, she just said that, like, Marco helps keep her sister alive, which just destroys my heart. She also said that her family is very grateful for the community support that they got during the time after Rachel was killed. They said that it was way beyond expectation. She also said that her family hopes to use their experience to help others going through similar tragic circumstances, because Brittany said that the family would like to see a person appointed to grieving families to take care of tasks that are, like, too painful to do. Too painful because they remind you over and over that your loved one is gone. And this revelation happened after Rachel's mother had to go to the bank and close down her dead daughter's account and had to, like, contact the post office to ask them to stop sending mail. Like, I never really thought of that. Like, that part never really presented itself in my mind, that somebody would have to do that, and that each time a letter showed up addressed to Rachel, her family would receive it and all over again have to just be reminded that she's gone. If they're having one moment of their day where they're not thinking about it, now they're thinking about it again. You know what I mean? Like, oh my God. When speaking about Rachel's murder, Brittany said that the guilty plea did bring some relief, but nothing would ever help her deal with the loss of her sister. And then she said specifically of this, and I quote, "It's not something that you can get over or ever will get over. People say time heals everything, but that's not the case. You'll live with this forever." And with that statement, that, my friends, is the story of the tragic murder of 18-year-old Rachel Pernosky. I hope you found this case to be interesting and informative, and I hope I gave you all the information you would want when looking into this case. And of course, I want to thank you for remembering Rachel with me today. And now, considering everything I've told you, all the information I've given you, I want to revisit the question of the day, and that was this. Well, actually, I have two questions. One, what do you believe was the motive for the murder of Rachel Pernosky? And the second thing I want to know is, do you believe that his intention that day was actually to kill her, or do you think something made him do something he was not planning to do? That's what I want to know. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below, because I feel like it could be a bit divisive. Anyways, before you leave, please don't forget to let me know what cases you'd like to see me cover in the future. As you know, I have a long list of cases, and every time you leave a suggestion, I put it on the list with your name next to it, so that if I cover it, I can give you a shout out. I love looking into the cases you guys suggest, because I know you're filled with good ideas and good taste, otherwise you would not be here. And I'd love if you could put some more hometown suggestions and let me know their hometown suggestions, because I'm really enjoying covering those. I've done a few. I don't know if they've come out yet, because, like, my schedule is all over the place. I film something and then it doesn't go out for 2 months, and I film something and it goes out the next week. So it's all over the place. But let me know any hometown cases that you'd like to see me cover. If you haven't already, please don't forget to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing the bell. I put out a new video every single week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you. And if you want to hang out more consistently, all my social media is listed down below, along with a link to my membership, where you get early access to non-sponsored videos and, like, priority comment responses, things like that. I want to say one last thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video, because without sponsors like Skillshare, I couldn't do this as consistently as I do. And a big thank you to you guys for being so supportive of all of my sponsors. You rock. Don't ever change. And now with all of that said, I just want to thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else in the world. That is tight. You are tight. Please stay safe and be a better person than you were yesterday. And I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.